Chapter 55, Chapter 49. Eliza broke off a piece of her Easter egg and obligingly handed it to Draco before she grabbed another piece for herself. She had told Sirius many times that as wizards, it seemed redundant to have Easter eggs, but Sirius found the concept far too entertaining to leave alone, and Remus, well, Remus had a sweet tooth the size of Wizarding Britain. He was hardly going to say no to more chocolate. Eliza munched on her chocolate as she opened up her journal to speak to Tom. She and her court were in the common room now, lounging in front of the giant fireplace. The sofa that used to be able to fit all of them on now only housed Draco and Blaze. Daphne was curled up in the armchair, and Eliza and Theo were on the floor surrounded by multitudes of cushions and, of course, Easter eggs. "What would you do if I told you I have a surprise for you?" "I would worry," came Tom's immediate response, and Eliza stifled a laugh. "Okay, I have a surprise for you. I'm worrying. Are you really ignoring me right now?" Draco complained next to her, and Eliza blindly handed him a piece of her Easter egg. She assumed that she correctly guessed his request because no further complaints met her ears. "It's a good thing, I promise. What have you done?" "Oh, thank you for asking. Today I had alchemy and I didn't blow anything up. And then I had magical theory, used my time turner, and attended ancient runes. In Transfiguration, I kept charming Draco's rabbit invisible so he couldn't find it, and you know that isn't what I meant, little star." She's talking to her bow. "Go and get your own chocolate." Daphne snapped from somewhere above her, and Eliza snickered slightly, throwing her half-finished Easter egg on top of the coffee table so Draco could reach it. "Remember your creepy little murder cave? The one with the locket?" The fact that you have to specify that is concerning. She could feel his exasperation without him even having to say anything. "Dumbledore knows your Horcrux is there. In the next month he'll leave Hogwarts, alone and completely isolated in the cave. He'll be at your mercy. Mercy that I will not be extending towards him. How did you find this out, little star?" And here it came. "Because Dumbledore is taking me with him." "Absolutely not," Tom wrote back so quickly that even his usual fine and elegant handwriting turned jagged. "I will not have you there just so he can exploit my weakness." Eliza felt her own temper flare, but managed to hold herself together. Tom wasn't saying she was weak. She had to remind herself. He was just scared. Eliza could handle scared. "And if I was your weakness, I'd agree, but I'm not. We're only stronger together, Tom. Together we're unstoppable. And soon we'll be rid of one of the last things stood in our way." Tom was silent for a while. Eliza couldn't even feel him from the other side of their bond, a sure sign that he was hiding something from her. "All right then," Tom wrote back, "finally, let's do this together." Eliza felt her mouth curl into a smile at Tom's acceptance, but her giddiness was ruined approximately 5 seconds later by Tom's next message. "You have to be the one to tell Severus about your plans, little star." As a matter of fact, she hadn't told Severus anything at all about her new plans yet, and she hadn't been planning on informing him anytime soon either. Buggering fuck. "This is your plan?" Severus deadpanned, staring at her from across his desk, a mountain of essays stacked between them. "Yep," Eliza replied, obnoxiously popping the P just to annoy him a bit more. "And then what?" "You and the Dark Lord corner one of the most powerful wizards of our time in a creepy cave in the middle of nowhere." "Yes, sir," Eliza chimed in, pretending to be oblivious to Severus' tone. "And then you just kill him, just like that?" he questioned incredulously, and Eliza allowed herself to roll her eyes. "Well, we're hardly leading him out there to serenade him, are we?" Severus let out a grumpy hiss and leveled her with a disapproving look. "I know for a fact it is within your capabilities to be serious, and you only choose to annoy me for your sadistic amusement. But I am asking you now, Eliza, for once, to be serious." Eliza let out a sigh as if Severus had placed a heavy burden on her and slumped across his desk, shoving a stack of essays out of her way so she could mope dramatically. "Dumbledore thinks he'll find a Horcrux in the cave and has agreed to take me with him, but Tom doesn't want to leave me alone with the old man in fear of what he will do. There's a potion that's used to guard the Horcrux that hopefully Dumbledore will ingest. It's supposed to create despair or something. Yes, I am intimately acquainted with that potion." Severus cut in quietly, a grimace on his face, and Eliza realized Tom must have asked the man to create it all those years ago. She elected to never tell Severus what end Regulus was met with. She feared the guilt of having a hand in his friend's death would be too much for the man to bear. So Tom will arrive on the scene because we don't know why exactly Dumbledore's brought me along. Tom will pretend to threaten to kill me to get Dumbledore to ingest the potion. We then kill Dumbledore. I can fix his corpse using my increasingly handy necromancy if he gets too beaten up, and we deliver his body back to his room or something. Eliza paused, furrowing her brows, or maybe we can just convince everyone he's ran away out of shame. Or that he's ran away with Grindelwald. She cut herself off and gave Severus a sheepish smile. We're still ironing out the details on that front. And so Albus Dumbledore will be no more, Severus said after a brief silence, somber and yet satisfied at the same time. Eliza could replicate his feelings. Albus Dumbledore was a great wizard, maybe even a great man. But he would not listen, and he had committed as many atrocities as Tom in his quest for greatness. He had to be stopped, and they would be the ones to do so. And yet he will still die a martyr, Severus pointed out with a sneer. He'll be glorified even in death. Eliza allowed a wide smirk to spread across her face. Just leave that to me. If Eliza just killed the man, then that would be a revenge poorly executed. No, Eliza would ruin that man and everything he stood for. And she and Tom would finish this as it had begun. They would do it together. The following Monday's issue of The Insider was one of the most damning yet. Skeletons in the closest. The headline read, and beneath was a very old family photo of the Dumbledores. Aberforth, Albus, and of course Ariana, the sister that no one knew about until now. Rita had visited Godric's Hallow and just so happened to run into Bathilda Bagshot, who had some rather fascinating tales to tell. They planned to release them over the month, each more damning than the last. The article went on to speak of Albus Dumbledore's neglect to his own family, how he left Aberforth and his sickly sister behind to chase his own greatness. The wizarding world's benevolent savior abandoned even his own family. Aberforth had refused to speak, but considering he hadn't spoken out in his brother's defense, or even chosen to be associated with the man, spoke volumes in itself. Dumbledore attended dinner in the Great Hall that night, although everyone noticed that his blue eyes seemed dimmer, and the hall full of students murmured quietly with one another. Already tension was spreading across the school, the cracks beginning to show in his homemade empire. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Blaise asked, and Eliza gasped in mock offense. "How dare you accuse me of reveling in the disgrace of our beloved headmaster, as if I would ever stoop so low as to..." Eliza was cut off when Theo stuffed a marshmallow into her mouth. She ate it with as much dignity as she could muster. Another Monday, another article. Poor Ariana, what a brutal way to die. Dumbledore sat at the head table despite the glares. Eliza bounded into the hall, trying to temper the bounce in her step as she and her court made their way to their usual spot. "What's got you so happy?" Daphne questioned, spinning around to blow a kiss towards Susan, who blushed at the other side of the hall. "It's Monday," Draco pointed out, buttering his toast with a viciousness that proved just how little of a morning person he was. "There's always a new issue of The Insider out on Monday." And Eliza wasn't the only one eagerly anticipating today's issue of the paper, even if she was the only one privy to its contents. Hushed conversation was spread across the hall, students taking non-discreet glances towards Dumbledore, who was looking more and more haggard by the day. "Please," Blaise scoffed. "I know this is Eliza we're talking about, but there's no way she has anything more on Dumbledore. The man's reputation is clinging on by a thread." Eliza smirked softly. "Would you fancy making a bet on that?" "Oh, come on," he exclaimed, almost spilling his coffee as he threw his arm out exasperatedly. "There's something more damning than the whole Ariana business." Eliza took a slow sip of her coffee, just because she could, and grinned at Blaise's withering stare. "You'll recall that the paramour Rita speaks of in the story, the one from the duel that tragically ended Ariana's life, remained nameless. Let's just say not even the Slytherin betting pool could have predicted their real identity. Well, whatever it is, we're all about to find out." Daphne pointed out as the owls started flooding the hall, and Eliza turned to face Theo when he let out a soft laugh. "The whole of Wizarding Britain is about to find out, not just us. What can I say? Eliza drawled and scratched Hedwig's head when she landed in front of her, paper tied around her leg. "I never do anything by halves. Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore," the headline read, and underneath rested a very damning, very real photo of the man himself, with none other than Gellert Grindelwald. Albus Dumbledore has many skeletons in his closet, but none could have expected Gellert Grindelwald to be one of them. The former Dark Lord had once been something else, Albus Dumbledore's former lover. "Merlin, fuck," Daphne breathed, and Eliza had to muffle her laughter. Merlin, fuck, indeed. That night Dumbledore didn't join the rest of the teachers in the Great Hall. In fact, no one saw him for the next week. Rumors began to rise. Dumbledore had been taken to Azkaban. Dumbledore had been sacked. Dumbledore had gone to return to his Dark Lord, blood supremacist ways. Eliza knew none of that was true, for she was currently stood outside the man's office. This time, it was actually through her own volition. Eliza walked up the stairs after the gargoyle finally let her pass and plastered a look of earnest worry and panic on her face. She had a few last moves to make. "Come in," Dumbledore said tiredly, and Eliza barged into the office, rambling explanations already falling from her lips. "Sir, I swear I never said anything to anyone about what you revealed to me. I have no idea how Skeeter found out, but it wasn't from me. You've respected my choices, sir, I promise. I wouldn't just throw it all back at you. And at ease, my dear girl," Dumbledore interrupted with a small smile, but Eliza could still see the weariness in his gaze. "I know you didn't have a hand in this." Eliza allowed her shoulders to slump in relief before she fixed her posture minutely. There was no need to oversell her act now when they were so close to the end. "If you don't mind me asking, sir, how did Rita Skeeter find out?" Dumbledore sighed heavily and motioned for Eliza to take the seat across from him. Slipping into the chair, Eliza kept her attention on Dumbledore and barely restrained a grimace when he took a lemon drop from the bowl on his desk. Eliza despised those sweets almost as much as she despised the man himself. "Miss Skeeter cornered me in my travels several days ago, and she was more than happy to share the secret of her success. She paid a visit to an old friend of mine, one Bathilda Bagshot, who still retains a residence in Godric's Hallow." Dumbledore sighed heavily. "And so the past catches up with us once again." A somber silence settled over them before Eliza dared to break it, jolting Dumbledore out of his musings. "Speaking of catching up, sir, have you managed to locate the next Horcrux?" Dumbledore studied her, peering at her over his half-moon spectacles before he gave one slow nod. "I plan to retrieve it at the end of the month, if you are still willing to join me." "Of course, Professor. If the choice is between destroying Tom or doing homework, well, I know which I'd rather pick any day," Eliza quipped, and Dumbledore smiled gently, patronizingly, with badly hidden pity in his eyes. Even now, so close to the end, he held onto his secrets, tried to hide his betrayal. But he was right. The past always did catch up to you in the end, and Dumbledore's past choices would be his undoing. Over the course of the next month, several things happened. 1. People began motioning for Dumbledore's removal from Hogwarts. Howlers came in every day screaming and wailing about the headmaster's betrayal and the skeletons in his closest. Some in the Wisengamot were even campaigning for Dumbledore to be stripped of his Order of Merlin, considering his past actions. Eliza couldn't deny that she was enjoying the havoc her paper was causing. 2. She had successfully animated a dead rabbit so well that Jormy had mistaken it for something alive and had took a bite out of it. The basilisk had moped for the following hour, hissing mulishly about Eliza betraying him and how Master would never have done such a thing. She could tell the basilisk missed Tom. She missed him too. They spoke every week, but it wasn't the same as being with him, hearing his voice and his damnable laugh. Her feelings for the bastard weren't disappearing any time soon, so it seemed. She just hoped Jormy was right, that after the war was won he'd stop running away from what was right in front of him. 3. Theo was exchanging regular letters with Sinclair, which although wasn't important in the grand scheme of things, it sure was entertaining. And then before Eliza knew it, the end of the month was almost upon them. Dumbledore had a note delivered to her, summoning her to his office that night. She had waited years for her revenge, and now that it was here it felt almost unreal. Tonight, Eliza would finally have her revenge. Tonight, Dumbledore would die. Her court were holding vigil in the common room when Eliza finally walked down to join them. She sadly couldn't wear her battle robes without arousing suspicion, but she had the underclothes on beneath her school cloak. Black pants, a reinforced long-sleeved top, and of course her dragon hide boots. She had stuffed her invisibility cloak into her pocket and left her time turner in Severus, care. She didn't want to know what could go wrong if that particular artifact was hit by a stray spell. Eliza, Draco breathed when he saw her appear at the bottom of the stairs. I thought I'd missed you, Eliza scoffed, and came to stand in front of her court, pausing to ruffle Astoria's hair, to which the girl let out a soft huff at. As if I wouldn't say goodbye, the other Slytherins in the common room pretended to turn a blind eye. They had gotten rather good at that over the years. Draco leapt to his feet and fished something out of his pocket, pressing it into her hands. Please take this. Eliza glanced at the file he has given to her and instantly started shaking her head. It's the Felix Felsis. I know what it is. Eliza interrupted and tried to hand it back. You know what I think about this, Draco. Now is not the time to cling to your ridiculous paranoia. The blonde snapped, desperate worry in his eyes. Eliza, we have no idea what will happen tonight. Can you please just take it? He begged, and Eliza felt herself hesitate under the weight of his imploring gaze, but she knew she couldn't back down. I refuse to put my trust into a potion, Eliza said adamantly. I refuse to give up control, especially on a night like this. Told you she wouldn't take it, Daphne muttered, and it was telling that her court hadn't even betted on it. Draco let out a gigantic sigh and flopped back on the sofa, running a hand through his unusually messy hair. It was worth a shot. She won't be needing the potion, Theo finally interrupted from where he was sharing the armchair with Blaze, their legs tangled together to form a sort of horrible eldritch abomination, because she'll be coming back just fine. Won't you, Eliza? Theo asked, although Eliza knew it was an order. Eliza looked at her court, at her family, and allowed a soft, tender smile to flit over her face. Of course I'll come back, she said, no trace of humor in her tone as she promised them that she would return, and then she cracked a grin. Where would you be without me? Eliza started heading towards the door, checking her pockets one last time when she heard Blaze's voice ring out behind her. Come home safe, Eliza, come home. Eliza turned back to look at them, killing the nervousness that was building inside of her. There was a lot she wanted to say to them. She wanted to say that nothing would go wrong, but she hadn't thought anything would have gone wrong on Samhain either. In truth, she didn't truly know how tonight would pan out, but she knew what she wanted to say to her court. I'll be fine. I'll come home. I love you all. Instead, she let a half grin cross her face and said, There best be a hot chocolate waiting for me when I come back, okay? Her court laughed quietly, a bit of worry dropping out of them, and Eliza turned to leave. She still couldn't say those words, but she hoped they got the message anyway. Dumbledore was waiting for her in the entrance hall. He didn't even bat an eye when Eliza popped up beside him, throwing the hood of her invisibility cloak off her head as she stood next to him. I see you have your cloak, Dumbledore said airily, although there was something somber in his eyes, some heaviness that leaked through his usual grandfatherly pretense. Eliza could only assume it was because of the grim task that supposedly lay ahead of them. Excellent. Let us go then. They began walking towards Hogsmeade in silence, and Eliza could feel the anticipation building within her, restless and distracting. She spoke to fill the silence, not to distract Dumbledore, but more to distract herself. And do you often frequent the Hogsmeade bars at this hour for it to be such an alibi, sir? She quipped, and a ghost of smile crept over Dumbledore's face. I admit I often offer Rosmerta my custom, much like you Slytherins do, or so I'm told. Eliza had no idea how he knew about the crates of fire whiskey they had hidden from Severus in the common room. Usually Eliza would ask, but now she didn't really see much point. It wasn't like any of that would matter for much longer now. I believe this will do, Dumbledore said when they reached the gates of Hogsmeade, not bothering to step into one of the bars. Eliza wasn't surprised. She doubted even Rosmerta would be willing to have Albus Dumbledore in her bar these days. Shaking the cloak off, Eliza stuffed it into her pocket and glanced at Dumbledore, who held his arm out for her to take. Before she could, however, he spoke. Are you ready, Eliza? Eliza nodded grimly, as ready as I'll ever be. She took his arm, and they disappeared with a sea rack. It was certainly an odd feeling, Eliza thought as they landed on the rocky outcropping. knowing that she was the acting death knell tonight. That every moment Dumbledore spent with her was unknowingly his last. That the clock was ticking, the sand draining, that every breath was leading to his last, and yet he remained oblivious. Eliza was judge, jury, and executioner, both witness and murderer. Just a girl, just another monster. "What do you think?" Dumbledore asked, and Eliza stared out at the scene around them. The sea crashed beneath them, the jagged rocks casting eerie dark blots onto its surface in the bleak moonlight. "Very scenic," Eliza said, dryly trying to ignore the tension thrumming through her. "Quite," Dumbledore mused, "but I'm afraid our final destination lies a bit further out." Eliza followed Dumbledore, surprised at the old man's agility as they scaled the cliff face down, and cursed Tom for being such a dramatic prick. A ghastly, treacherous murder cave was not Eliza's ideal vacationing spot. Dumbledore paused, raising his wand hand to cast the light of the lumos across the dark waters you see. He questioned, gesturing to a fissure in the cliff face where the dark water was swirling. "You will not object to a bit of a swim?" he asked, and Eliza tried to crack a smile. "As long as there isn't a kelpie there, sir, I think I'll manage." Dumbledore let out a chuckle before he dived into the water with a surprising amount of agility and began swimming for the cave. Eliza blinked in surprise over the action. It was easy to forget sometimes, what with the whole grandfatherly act he put on, just what a formidable wizard Dumbledore was. Shaking out of her musings, Eliza checked her wand was still in her holster before she dived in. The water was icy, and Eliza cringed as she swam through it, feeling the cold seep into her bones, but still, she continued on. She swam after Dumbledore until eventually they came to the fissure in the cliff face. The passageway curved, and soon they emerged from the sea. Shaking and shivering, Eliza clambered up the weathered steps to stand by Dumbledore. Eliza cast a drying and warming charm on herself as Dumbledore studied the cave around them. "This is indeed the place," Dumbledore mentioned, voice echoing out across the cave as he ran a hand over the rocky walls. "Then it's just a matter of finding the entrance," Eliza commented, coming to join Dumbledore as she tried to find the seam in Tom's enchantments. Eliza ran a few diagnostic charms of her own as Dumbledore did the same at the other side of the cave, until eventually he let out a quiet exclamation. Turning to face him, Eliza watched as Dumbledore revealed the entrance of the cave. Bright, blinding, light etched an archway into the wall. Dumbledore didn't attempt to enter it, however, and stared at it for another minute or two. "Oh, surely not," Dumbledore said, sounding almost disappointed, so crude. Eliza watched in confusion as he conjured a silver knife, shaking back the sleeve of his robe before the realization hit her. "Oh," she found herself saying, "blood payment." "Indeed," Dumbledore said somewhat disdainfully, and Eliza had to stop herself from saying anything. Just because blood magic offended Dumbledore's delicate sensibilities didn't mean it wasn't useful. But once again, it didn't matter. Tick-tock goes the clock. Dumbledore drew the knife over his arm, and blood splattered against the dark cave walls that soon melted away, disappearing to reveal the cave itself as Dumbledore healed his arm. The second Eliza stepped into the cave, she was instantly overcome with an overwhelming familiar sensation: death. She and Tom had discussed the fact that there were quite a lot of inferi in the cave. After the near disaster of the Ministry, when Eliza was confronted with the veil of death, they had decided to proceed with caution when it came to Eliza's still somewhat untamed necromancy. She could sense the inferi beneath the surface of the lake, but unlike what happened at the cemetery, Eliza didn't feel the need to reach out to them. They were more of just a vague presence in the back of her mind, which suited her fine. Inferi were creepy, and so was the lake they were underneath. The inky black surface betrayed nothing, insidiously still as she and Dumbledore stared out across the dark expanse. In the middle of the lake was an island, a misty green glow emitting from it that reflected on the surrounding water. "Let us walk," said Dumbledore quietly. "Be very careful not to step into the water. Stay close to me." They walked in silence, not that Eliza blamed the old man for being quiet. She knew exactly what was going on, and she still found Tom's creepy murder cave incredibly unsettling. The darkness around them didn't feel like normal darkness. It was oppressive and cloying. It felt hungry. Eliza was familiar with that kind of darkness, and she knew she didn't want to stick around here any longer than she had to. "Aha!" Dumbledore said softly, coming to a halt at the bank of the lake, and Eliza paused as she watched him unravel the next of Tom's ridiculous traps. I think, Dumbledore said, as he revealed the old copper chain, pulling it from the depths of the water, we have found the right place. The chain clinked noisily, so much louder in the dark expanse of the cave, as slowly it pulled a small, ghostly row boat out of the water. The boat sailed along the lake silently, not even leaving a ripple in its wake, as it eventually came to a stop in front of her and Dumbledore. Sir, Eliza said, breaking the silence, injecting just enough fear into her voice for Dumbledore to notice. What's in the water? Dumbledore glanced at her, and then turned to look back out at the lake. Hopefully we shall never have to find out. Now, Eliza, get into the boat, and remember to be careful not to touch the water. Eliza nodded and clambered into the boat, breathing in deeply as they sailed across the water. Tonight, Dumbledore would die. He would die for ruining her life, for abandoning her to the Dursleys, for treating her like a soldier rather than a child, a pawn and not a person. Tonight, Eliza would finally get her revenge. Something inside of her finally settled, and when she opened her eyes again, she could feel the difference within herself. Both her court and Tom had noticed it in her, that some part of her tended to shut down sometimes. The scraps of kindness she had managed to save in herself, any doubt and hesitation, it was all forgotten. Tom had compared her to a fox whenever it was stalking its prey. Nothing else mattered but the fight, the next move, the next breath, the next kill. The greenish light seemed to grow brighter as they neared the small rocky island, and within minutes the boat came to a halt, bumping against the rocky outcropping of the island. Careful not to touch the water, Eliza. Dumbledore warned again needlessly as Eliza clambered out of the boat. Ignoring Dumbledore behind her, Eliza instead approached the basin at the center of the island. The potion glowed a phosphorescent green, and when Eliza raised a hand to it, she found herself repelled by an invisible force. Tom was nothing if not thorough. Stand back, if you would, Eliza, Dumbledore said, as he came to join her in front of the basin. I see you have found the first of the enchantments guarding the Horcrux. I'll leave the rest to you, sir. Eliza demurred and shuffled a few steps backwards as Dumbledore started casting diagnostic charms on the basin. At the same time, Eliza dropped her occlumency shields, focusing on reaching across her and Tom's connection, pressing images into his mind. Yes, I think so, Dumbledore announced, staring into the basin. Only by drinking it can I empty the basin and see what lies in its depths. It happened quickly. Dumbledore had just spoken, and then there was a loud crack. Neither she nor Dumbledore had time to react before Tom apparated into the cave. Before Eliza could even move, Tom had yanked her backwards, placing his wand at her throat and wrapping his other arm around her body. Dumbledore trained his wand on Tom, but couldn't get a clear hit. Eliza couldn't move even if she had wanted to. Well, Tom breathed, moving slightly so he was completely behind Eliza. Isn't this just cozy? He simpered. Move away, Tom, Dumbledore demanded steadily, wand hand not wavering as he pointed it at Tom. Move away now. And why would I do that? Eliza heard Tom ask, sickly sweet, and flinched when he began to softly play with her hair, twirling a strand around his finger. Dumbledore tracked the movement, and when Eliza met his eyes, she tried to inject as much fear into them as possible. I think the little star is fine right here, Tom commented, and Eliza started struggling fruitlessly, trying to wriggle out of his hold. Fuck off, Eliza spat out and tried to kick his leg, but froze when Tom jabbed his wand harshly into her throat as a warning. Now, little star, let the adults talk here. Silence descended over them as Dumbledore stood, frozen as he took in the sight before him, before his shoulders slumped minutely. What do you want, Tom? She felt Tom tense slightly at the use of his real name, and tried not to roll her eyes as he continued with his theatrics. Well, he began lightly, it seems a shame for you to have traveled all this way without staying for a while. Drink the potion, Albus. Dumbledore glanced at the basin, grip on his wand tightening before he glanced back at both her and Tom with a grim look in his eyes. Go on, Dumbledore, Tom taunted, evidently enjoying himself. Drink the potion to rescue your precious savior. And yet still Dumbledore refused to move, and Eliza felt her disbelief set in as he didn't move to take the potion. Take the potion, Tom demanded, all pretense of civility gone, or I kill her. Dumbledore didn't move. Tom let out a manic laugh, jarringly loud in the horrid, uncomfortable silence that had settled over them, and Eliza stared at Dumbledore in shock. "Is this how you treat your savior?" Tom questioned in disbelief, but Eliza could hear the undercurrents of anger in his voice. "Do you see this, Eliza? This is how much you mean to them, Eliza," Dumbledore said, cutting off Tom, but seemingly couldn't bring himself to say anything more, couldn't be bothered defending himself against Tom's truthful accusations. Eliza knew what he was thinking. Eliza was a Horcrux. She would have to die by Tom's hand eventually. If not now, then she would have to later. "I'm sorry, my dear girl," Dumbledore murmured. He couldn't even meet her eyes. "The girl who lived, sacrificed by the almighty Dumbledore," Tom drawled, and Eliza allowed a grin to creep over her face as Tom's arms slowly started to relax around her. "Or at least, that's how the story would have gone," Eliza chimed in, and felt her smirk grow when Dumbledore's wand hand wavered. "That's what you wanted, wasn't it, Dumbledore? To create a perfect little child soldier. Too bad you didn't get your way," Eliza finished viciously, and she and Tom raised their wands at the same time, pointing them towards the stupefied Dumbledore. "My girl," he said, "whatever he has promised you, he's lying, believe me." Tom laughed again at Dumbledore's pitiful attempt at coercion. "Don't you get it yet? I've not promised her anything. Eliza has always been helping me, since the very beginning." But Tom said with an airy sigh, "I grow bored of this needless chit-chat. I'd say it's about time we ended this. What do you think, darling?" Eliza shifted minutely, so she and Tom were stood side by side, and smirked widely. "I'm ready when you are." The cave immediately burst into an explosion of light. Tom had cast the first spell, lunging forward as he tried to catch Dumbledore with a Crucio before the duel began. Eliza found herself almost frozen in the onslaught, caught between the two most powerful wizards of their time. Tom and Dumbledore were exchanging spells at a lightning-fast speed, and Eliza could barely keep track of them, the spell light bouncing off the dark waters surrounding them. Tom threw up a Protego to block Dumbledore's curse, and then Eliza moved. Regaining her place, next to Tom, Eliza began casting spells in a flurry, causing Dumbledore to split his attention. She and Tom moved as one, casting and blocking, and never ceasing as they moved closer and closer in on Dumbledore. It was like they were one person, sharing the same mind. Whenever Tom needed cover, Eliza was there in an instant. They moved with each other perfectly, and yet still Dumbledore stood strong. With a wide sweeping motion, flames erupted from Dumbledore's wand, the roaring fire surrounding him and splitting up her and Tom as they ducked to escape the ferocious heat of the burning orange flames. She could see through the fire as Dumbledore started dueling Tom in earnest once again, and with a muffled curse Eliza found she couldn't cut through the flames. Reaching into her pockets, Eliza frantically grabbed for her rune stones, transfiguring her nails into iron claws. In one smooth motion, she cut her hand and coated the stones in blood. Hoping for the best, Eliza tossed them into Dumbledore's fire and smiled in satisfaction when the flames were instantly dispelled, hot steam rising up in its place. And he said blood magic was crude. Eliza ducked into the steam after casting a quick protection charm to try and return to Tom on the other side of their small rocky outcrop. "You can leave her out of this, Tom," Dumbledore was saying to him. "Whatever lies you told her, it would be more merciful to simply kill her." Tom let out a scoff, but didn't return to casting, as if he was entertaining Dumbledore. It wasn't until his burning red eyes darted towards her did she realize he was giving her time to cut in, time to take her revenge. "You still don't get it, do you?" Eliza called, the steam now dissipating, leaving her stood on the other side of Dumbledore, across from Tom. "This isn't about what he promised me. This is on you," she ground out. Eliza started prowling closer, wand clenched tightly in her hand. "You left me to rot at the Dursleys. You left me at that orphanage without once checking up on me, even though you were my magical guardian." Eliza's wand let out a few stray sparks, and Dumbledore eyed them warily, and yet made no move to return to dueling. "You were going to sacrifice me because you didn't believe I was anything more than the Dark Lord's Horcrux. You're biased, and you're a manipulator. You refused to accept your own failings, and you were so caught up in your role as chess master you forgot that I would never be anyone's pawn." Eliza finished strongly, and with barely a flick of her wrist, sent an entrails-expelling curse in Dumbledore's direction. The duel began again. Eliza couldn't even keep track of the spells she was casting anymore, but the magic now had a physical presence that threatened to choke them as they continued to duel ferociously. Eliza cursed as Dumbledore's bombarder hit the ground in front of her. She tried to duck out of the way, but felt her arm get caught by the blast, sharp, jagged rock cutting into it. Shaking off the pain, Eliza made it back to Tom, who was still dueling like nothing could stop him. Spell after spell he cast without stumbling. If she thought he was powerful in her 4th year, he was at a whole new level now. Dumbledore wasn't, and he was tiring. Eliza panted harshly as they dueled, moving faster than she had in her entire life as she and Tom tried to defeat Dumbledore. She could feel herself tiring, and yet she refused to give up. Not now, not when they were so close. Dumbledore had just deflected Eliza's disintegration curse when a spell of Tom's hit. Dumbledore's wand arm broke with a snap that echoed around the cave, and Eliza watched in disbelief as the old man stumbled, back hitting the basin in the middle of the island. Eliza paused in her casting and watched as Tom cast an unknown spell that made Dumbledore let out a pained, choked gasp and stumble to the floor. Turning to face Tom, Eliza rose an inquiring eyebrow. Tom lowered his wand slightly, panting heavily. He was covered in cuts, blood splattered across his robes, but otherwise didn't seem to be badly injured. Paralysis curse targets the spine and stops blood flow. He has half an hour left to live in his current state, Tom remarked, almost chipper as a smug smirk crept over his face. They'll know, Dumbledore choked out weakly, and yet with far more venom than she thought he was capable of. People will know. You won't win. You never will. Oh, Eliza simpered with a vicious smile. Were you counting on Severus? You really should have been listening to Moody after all, once a Death Eater, Tom cut in, draping an arm over Eliza's shoulder as he came to stand next to her, always a Death Eater. And as for your order, well, there isn't much left, is there? Eliza said with an elegant shrug, feeling a bolt of vindictiveness run through her. It's a shame Moody didn't see who killed him. Eris, Dumbledore said, betrayal in his eyes, and Eliza's grin widened. Dumbledore let out a pained groan as he tried to move, his body trembling from the small effort, and Eliza heard Tom huff a laugh. How does failure feel, Dumbledore? How does it feel to know I've won? You have no followers. You're hated in the eyes of the public. You have nothing left. Tom gloated, leaving Eliza's side to come stand closer to Dumbledore, an almost feral smile on his face, the green glow of the potion reflecting in his eyes. It was because Eliza was watching them so closely did she see Dumbledore's hand slowly, so slowly, creep towards his forgotten wand. Dumbledore's hand closed around the handle, and Eliza moved in an instant. Expelliarmus, she yelled, and Dumbledore's wand was flung out of his hand, sailing through the air, and Eliza deftly caught it. It hummed in her hand, warming slightly as Eliza twirled it with a lazy smirk on her face. Getting desperate, are we? Eliza questioned liltingly before she focused on her breathing, collecting herself as she spoke. I wouldn't bother trying. There's no way you'd make it out alive. With a measured twitch of her fingers, Eliza took control of a portion of the inferi in the lake. The bodies started rising to the top of the water, rotting hands and bodies bobbing on the surface of the lake, and Dumbledore let out a horrified, choked gasp as he tried to shuffle further away from the water. His arms gave out on him, and he slumped even further to the ground, breathing harshly. Ah yes, did we forget to mention that? Tom commented in a blasé fashion. It seems you had a necromancer hidden in your ranks all this time. Eliza called back her magic, and let the corpses sink back into the water for the moment, and strode over to Tom as Dumbledore's breathing became harsher and harsher. Silence descended over them, interrupted only by Dumbledore's rasping, panicked breaths. Do you want the honors, little star? Tom asked softly, and Eliza looked at him in surprise, shocked that he would even ask her. Eliza shook her head and instead reached down to intertwine her fingers with Tom's free hand. You do it, she said quietly. Do it for me. For all he's done to you. Tom had been fighting this war for far longer than she had. It was only fair he finished the fight they had started. Tom didn't look away from her, red eyes staring deeply into her own before finally, after what felt like an eternity, he looked away. Goodbye, Dumbledore, Tom said quietly, a blank look on his face even though his red eyes gleamed. Avada Kedavra, there was a flash of green, and for a second that was all Eliza could see before her vision cleared. Dumbledore was slumped on the floor, blue eyes unseeing, bruised and broken, and most importantly, he's dead, Eliza breathed, staring uncomprehendingly at the body. He's dead, Tom echoed, and Eliza suspected she had a similar blank look on her face. We did it. Eliza stuttered out and glanced away from Dumbledore's body when Tom's hand tightened around hers. She wasn't given any warning before Tom moved his arm, pulling her into him. In one smooth motion, he picked her up and spanned them both around, and Eliza let out a peal of laughter, the sound bouncing off the cave walls. We did it, Tom exclaimed with a sharp laugh, setting her down on the ground in front of him. We've won the war, Eliza said, not looking away from Tom's bright eyes. What next? Tom quipped with a wide smile that Eliza found herself returning. What next? She couldn't wait to find out.